How did ancient humans keep babies alive? A foal, a baby horse, stands and walks within 1 hour of being born. A wildebeest calf runs with the herd on day 1. A baby sea turtle hatches, digs out of the sand, and swims into the ocean entirely alone. Nobody teaches it. Nobody helps. And then there's a human baby. A human baby cannot hold up its own head. It cannot focus its eyes past about a foot. It cannot regulate its body temperature. It cannot move toward food or away from danger. It can do almost nothing except cry and hope that someone notices. We are the most helpless infants on the planet, by an enormous margin. So how did we survive? In a world without hospitals, without formula, without thermostats, how did the most helpless baby in nature become the ancestor of 8 billion people? The answer involves grandmothers, wet nurses, evolutionary manipulation, and one of the most sophisticated survival systems ever developed. Let's get into it. To understand the ancient solution, you need to understand why human babies are so helpless in the first place. Because the answer is actually fascinating, it all starts with the brain. Human brains are enormous, relative to body size, larger than any other animals. A big brain needs a big skull. But here's the problem: humans walk upright. Bipedalism narrowed our pelvis over millions of years. A narrow pelvis means a narrow birth canal. A big skull cannot fit through a narrow canal. Evolution's solution was drastic: give birth early, before the skull gets too large, before the brain is fully formed. Human babies are born at 9 months, but comparative primate research suggests we should gestate for about 18 months before our brains reach the developmental level that other primates are at birth. We're essentially born 6 to 9 months premature. The term fourth trimester was coined to describe the first 3 months of human life, when development that would happen in the womb in other primates is happening outside it instead. This means the ancient caregiver wasn't just dealing with a newborn, they were dealing with an external fetus, a creature that, by the developmental standards of every other primate, wasn't ready to exist in the world yet. So how did ancient humans solve this? They did something no other primate does to the same extent. They shared the baby. Anthropologists call it alloparenting, the care of a child by individuals other than the biological parents. And in ancient hunter-gatherer bands, it wasn't optional. It was the entire system. The most important alloparent in human evolutionary history? The grandmother. This is called the grandmother hypothesis, and it's one of the most compelling ideas in evolutionary biology. Here's the puzzle. Why do human women live for decades past menopause? In almost every other animal, females die at or shortly after the end of their reproductive years, because that's when they stop being useful to their genes. But human grandmothers live on, sometimes for 30 or 40 years after their last child. Why? Because they're still doing something critically important. Grandmothers in traditional societies forage additional food, freeing mothers to nurse more efficiently. They carry and watch infants, freeing mothers to have subsequent children sooner. Studies of historical and contemporary traditional populations show that the presence of a maternal grandmother increases infant survival rates dramatically, by 30 to 50% in some populations. The grandmother isn't just family, she's a survival technology. But it wasn't just grandmothers. Aunts, older sisters, cousins, male provisioners, the whole band participated. Wet nursing, breastfeeding a baby not your own, was standard practice across virtually every culture. If a mother died or couldn't produce milk, other lactating women in the band simply fed the baby, not as charity, as the understood social contract of survival. This shared caregiving network also allowed something crucial: shorter birth intervals. With other mothers and grandmothers helping carry and feed the existing baby, a human mother could wean her child earlier than she could alone and fall pregnant again sooner. This accelerated human population growth beyond what any solo parenting primate could achieve. Inside the village system, what did caregivers actually do to keep a baby alive? First, keep it warm. A human newborn cannot regulate its own body temperature for weeks. Without fire and skin contact, a baby in any non-tropical climate could die of cold exposure in hours. Ancient caregivers kept infants pressed against their skin almost continuously, not just for warmth, but because skin-to-skin contact stabilizes heart rate, breathing, and blood sugar. Modern medicine now calls this kangaroo care and uses it in neonatal intensive care units. Ancient humans invented it out of necessity. Second, keep it fed. On-demand breastfeeding, nursing whenever the baby showed hunger signals, not on a schedule, was the only option, and is still the most effective nutritional strategy for infants. Critically, colostrum, the first milk produced after birth, is packed with maternal antibodies. It's essentially a transferred immune system, protecting the newborn against the specific pathogens its mother's body has already learned to fight. The original vaccine. Third, keep it quiet. This one sounds strange until you realize a crying baby in the ancient world was a location signal to predators and to rival bands. Ancient caregivers developed extraordinary sensitivity to infant pre-cry signals, the subtle changes in posture and expression that precede a cry by seconds, so they could respond before the sound started. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies show their infants cry dramatically less than infants in industrialized countries, not because they're different babies, but because the response time is faster and more complete. Fourth, carry it. The baby goes where the caregiver goes. Sling-style baby carriers, among the oldest human technologies, kept the infant against the body during all daily activities. This solved warmth, feeding access, calming, and protection simultaneously. Now for the threats. Because the ancient world had a lot of ways to kill an infant. Cold, already covered, but worth emphasizing. In non-tropical environments, temperature was the most immediate threat. Lose the fire, lose skin contact, and a baby could be dead by morning. Starvation. A mother who couldn't produce milk or who died left an infant with perhaps days to live. Wet nursing was the lifeline, but it required another lactating woman to be present and willing. The community had to be functional for this to work. Predators, large cats, hyenas, large birds of prey, all known opportunistic predators of human infants. The practice of keeping babies off the ground, wrapped to the body, and near the center of the camp at night wasn't paranoia. It was evidence-based childcare, infection. Before antibiotics, an umbilical cord infection, a wound, contaminated water, any of these could kill a newborn. Ancient peoples developed practices, fire cauterizing, plant-based antiseptics, keeping wounds clean, that reduced infection risk. Colostrum's antibody load was critical here too. And then there's the hardest topic, infanticide. In conditions of extreme resource scarcity, severe famine, brutal winter, the death of the primary caregiver, ancient peoples sometimes made the agonizing decision not to try to keep an infant alive. This is documented across nearly every culture at some point in history. It's not comfortable, but it's part of the honest picture of what ancient infant survival actually looked like, the brutal arithmetic of keeping the rest of the group alive. The ancient miracle isn't that some babies didn't make it, it's that so many did. Here's the most surprising part of the whole story. The baby isn't passive in this equation. The baby is actively manipulating its caregivers, using biology that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. Those big round eyes, the small nose, the high forehead, the chubby cheeks. This is called the Kinchin schema, the baby schema, first described by ethologist Konrad Lorenz. These features are not coincidental. They are a precisely calibrated set of signals that trigger involuntary caregiving responses in adult humans. Show an adult a baby face, any baby face, even a cartoon one with those features, and their brain's reward circuits activate. They feel compelled to protect it. You cannot help it. It's wired in. The smell of a newborn's head triggers measurable hormonal responses in adults. Researchers have shown that smelling a newborn activates the same dopamine reward pathways as eating when you're hungry. And then there's the cry. Infant crying is neurologically unique in its irritation. It is specifically tuned to be difficult to ignore, difficult to habituate to, and almost impossible to sleep through. This isn't cruelty, it's communication technology. The baby has no other way to signal need, so evolution made the signal unavoidable. There's even a phenomenon called cute aggression, the urge to squeeze or pinch something you find overwhelmingly cute. Researchers believe this is the brain's way of regulating its own overwhelmed response to extreme cuteness, allowing the caregiver to function despite being flooded with attachment neurochemicals. The baby is running an ancient program, and you are the hardware it's designed to run on. So here's the thing about the most helpless baby on Earth. Its helplessness was the point. The helpless baby demanded caregiving. The caregiving required community. The community built bonds so strong that the group could cooperate on everything else: food, defense, knowledge, technology. The helpless baby didn't just survive despite needing so much help. It needed so much help that it forced us to become social animals capable of building civilization. The grandmother system, the wet nurse network, the village, these weren't nice extras. They were the engine. They're why humans, alone among primates, can grow a population so fast. They're why we can afford to have children who are useless for years. They're why we pass knowledge from generation to generation in such rich, redundant, overlapping ways. And here's the modern takeaway. When parents today feel overwhelmed and isolated, raising children without extended family, without a band, without alloparents, that feeling isn't weakness. It's the correct response to attempting something that was never designed to be done by two people alone. The human parenting system requires a village. The fact that the village is gone is the problem, not the parents. If this made you see the world a little differently, subscribe. We have a lot more where this came from.